Planet Zoo is well known for the player having complete control of every aspect, from continent, biome, and terrain type, to most importantly, the animals they put in the zoo. But what if that choice was completely taken away? Today we're going to be doing a randomized challenge, where everything is randomized for me, including money and conservation credits. The first thing I do is move the entrance to somewhere where the guests won't have to walk around too much, and then it's time for me to fight for my life while making some paths. And while I do that, I'm going to go and explain the challenge rules. What I'm going to do is for every new animal, I'm going to roll on a number generator. Then I'm going to use a list of all the animals in the game to see who's going to get placed next. For cash and conservation credits, I didn't want to make it too easy. For cash, I made it up to 100k to be randomized. And for conservation credits, I did up to 20k. I got 47,000 and then 7,000 respectively to play around with. Then I started placing down some facilities, making sure to use the heat map to see where it negatively impact our guests. Because if they see where our staff go to rest up, they're going to go into a manhunting rage. So after rolling the random number generator to get our first animal, it gave me the alpine goat. So I went ahead and got a couple of these guys, going to place them down. After placing them down, I just wanted to check to make sure they couldn't get out anywhere. I increased the height of the goat's habitat to make sure they couldn't get out anywhere. And after some final touches, they looked pretty happy. I put down some food and drink for our guests and made sure to pretty them up so they didn't look like they were going to be extras in Cask of Amontillado. Then I rolled for our next animal and got the giant forest scorpion, so I made sure to get a couple of these guys. After putting them in their exhibit, I changed up their enrichments so they were happier and also made sure that it wasn't too cold or too humid for them. Our animal right after that was actually the puff adder. So I did the exact same thing like I did with the giant forest scorpions. And after these two exhibits, we're going to go straight into our next animal, which rolled up as a dingo. I would come back to add more things later, but I just want to spend a little bit of time beautifying up their habitat. So I added some river rocks to make it look like a dried up riverbed went through the middle of their habitat. Checked up on the goats after a little bit, and I saw they were doing really well. They already had a couple offspring, and they were all really happy. I then put down the information booth and a hat's fantastic, but for the information booth, there wasn't a lot of signs, so I made it look like the Riddler decorated it and put a bunch of question marks because that was pretty much the only thing I had in mind to make it look a little bit more interesting. And then for our next animal, we actually rolled the Nile Letre, so I put them in their habitat. And then I did the time-honored tradition of putting a bunch of rocks down to make it look a little bit more natural, using the advanced controls to make it look a little bit nicer. And if you ignore the protesters, they look pretty happy. They're just really stressed out, probably because of all the screaming. And then I started working on the pit, which is a habitat I made specifically for these animals we were about to get next, because I knew they were pretty confident and they weren't going to be freaked out by people looking over them, and I just really wanted them to have a good view of the animals. After a snowstorm, I had to stop neglecting my animals, and I had to take care of them by adding heaters to their habitats so they'd stop writing me angry letters. And then our next animal that I was going to add in was the giant otter, which is a really cool but terrifying animal, so I wanted people to have a really nice view of them. I put a lot of effort into the foliage just to make it look a lot more natural. After putting the otters in their enclosure, they told me they weren't happy with the amount of grass that they currently had, so I had to go get a guy to put down some sod for them. The last thing I had to add was some enrichment. I've never gotten this platform float to work, so I just completely abandoned that idea and switched up to a mud bath. I put some fish in a box at the bottom of their lake, and then I also put down a bubble machine because I think that's adorable. I spent way too long gaslighting myself into thinking I could make a nice looking waterfall, which is actually a lot harder than it seems. Yeah, maybe a couple extra rocks will really help sell the deal. Yeah, there you go, buddy. While I was checking over our other animals, I noticed that one of them had a fur mutation. And oh, sorry, ma'am. We'll leave you be. Our next two animals were actually both exhibits. We have the Western Diamondback, which, just like all the others, I set up, changed their climate, and got them all comfortable. And then for our next guys, we got the green iguanas. They're actually one of my favorites. I mean, how can you not love a face like that? Our next animal was the sable antelope, which I put with the other hooved animals, just so we can liven up the place a little bit more. And I gotta say, Frontier did a really good job with animating these guys. After that, we got a pair of honey badgers for our next animal. So like all the others, paused it, set up the rock situation, trying to make it look all fancy. And I'm not gonna lie, I really struggled with this habitat, just because I'm so used to doing really lush landscapes. And these guys just really want like a sand pit. I want to try something a little bit different than I usually do, and instead of having their den out in the open, I buried it underground to make it look a little bit more natural. I tried to sneak in some green where I could, but it was a little harder with these guys. And I definitely wanted to work on making them a little climbing area, so I spent a lot of time making sure that they could interact with all this stuff that I was putting down. I just love seeing all the hard work they put into these climbing animations, and I think they're really cute just seeing them running around. I still tried to mix in some of the more natural aesthetic with the logs and sticks and stuff, but like I said, it was a lot harder because they're very picky on their foliage. All in all, though, I was pretty happy with how everything came out. The lady honey badger was the first one on the scene. And I mean, how can you not love these guys? Look at those little paws. It is a little janky sometimes when parts intersect and they don't really know how to interact with it. But for the most part, it's pretty good. I also noticed the baby following in his mama's footsteps, trying to climb around. I'll be honest, if these guys weren't so aggressive, I would definitely try to pet one. I then built up a restaurant, which took me a long time because I'm not really a builder for the people. I mostly just like care about the animal side of the zoo. But I wanted to try my hand at just making something that looked a little nice. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this took a very long time. I don't know if it's just because I'm not used to the menus or like what different kind of items they have that go well together. But this took up probably like an hour of my time. I wanted to bring in some nature on the inside though, so I made a little flower bed to kind of spruce it up. And I really liked how it turned out. I think it came out pretty well for my level of building expertise, but I did find myself constantly going back and adding little things over and over. Then for our next animal was actually the Timberwolves, which I managed to get one with a firm mutation. So I was really excited to see him in his habitat. Again, I used null barriers to kind of sketch everything out and then went in with some rocks. I wanted to make like a ice den, which I think I did pretty well. I then laid down a little river, planted some plants, and fiddled with rocks for probably 30 more minutes. And with my past experience already in this playthrough, I try to use the pre-made waterfall selections. I will say, after all the hard work that went into making this habitat, I'm very happy with seeing the animals look so content. After spending almost an hour on that wolf habitat, I feel like some of our oldest animals need an upgrade. So we're going to start with the goats. I mean, look at this majestic guy. We can't just leave him in here. Guests have also been complaining because they have x-ray vision and can see our water treatment facility. So another perk of moving the goats would be that I can put a path over their old enclosure and then make a staff path out of the one that goes over the water treatment facility. I'm aiming to have a really nice big area here, that way the goats can have a giant mountain to climb. This is also going to cost a pretty penny, so I made sure to move over the donation bins. That way we can hopefully recoup some of the costs. It's pretty obvious because they're goats that they would really want to climb, but after watching every single one of these goats that I put in this new enclosure run to a single rock just to jump on top of it, I can tell how much they would really want a giant goat mountain. So before I can build Giant Goat Mountain, I have to put down some necessities, just so the goats don't call in some protesters. And I'm planning on putting this rubbing post at the top of one of the peaks of Goat Mountain, just to have some incentive for them to go up there. At first, I think about using some of the pre-made building stuff, because although these are mostly for like climbing animals like lemurs or apes, for the most part, goats can also use them. But then I decided to just go ahead and make my own because I feel like that's one, more creative, and two, I can really shape the habitat with it. Placing rocks is definitely one of my weak points, but I'm trying to get better at it because I think it definitely just adds some visual interest to every single habitat. I'm going in with absolutely no plan here when I'm placing all of these rocks or structures. I'm just really hoping that everything just kind of falls into place if I place enough of them. And I'm not even halfway done whenever a goat already tries to climb up to the peak of the mountain, which just goes to show how excited they're going to be whenever this is all done for them. I'm really trying to incorporate the entire habitat whenever I'm building this mountain, so it's not just like a single peak and that's it. Even though they're goats, I'm honestly pretty worried that they're not going to be able to get up certain parts of this, or some parts might be too small for them to kind of go in between. But whenever I look at the heat map, honestly, everything's accessible, which is awesome. Because honestly, nothing's worse than working on something like this for 30 minutes and then they can't even use the thing you just built. My animals keep getting goat napped by the zookeepers because they're going too high. So the only thing I can think of is to bring up the walls of the enclosure and put anti-climbing on it. It's starting to look like some kind of goat dungeon because there's no sunlight reaching the bottom of the ground. So then I go ahead and change some of the barrier to chain link fence, that way the sunlight can come through. Also go ahead and make a tiny little pond for them. They don't really need it because they already have the water pipe, but I think it just adds a little character to the habitat. Then it's time to start construction on the goat sky base. What's really nice is the staff can also access this area up here, so there's not going to be any problems later down the line. I put a small overhang on the front of the house because I'm planning on putting something here later. After building most of the goat's house, I just wanted to make something for it to look like it was sitting on. So I just kept mixing the different tones of the rock just to give some more visual interest. And I'm adding some bulk to this so it looks like it's actually sitting on these rocks for support instead of magically floating. And for the most important part of this habitat's build, I add the golden goat statue. Add a couple more of these statues, not just to hype up the goats, but just in case any of our guests forget where they are. Looks like one of our goats has found the pillar at the top of the peak and is getting out some pent up frustration on it. I did also release some of the goats. Although this area is huge and it could definitely support all of them, some of the other goats were upset by overcrowding. I then went through the habitat and kept adding to the terrain, adding dirt paths where I think the goats would most likely walk, and adding sand to their little pond area. And now it's time for one of my favorites, adding foliage. I wanted to try to get a bunch of different heights of trees and grasses here, just to add to the verticality of the habitat itself. Also added some moss to the rocks just to add some texture to everything, and to make it look a little bit more green and cohesive. Although it started snowing, none of our goats actually cared because they really liked the snow, so I didn't have to worry about that at least. But I did make them a little sunflower garden as soon as the guests walk in. The one thing about the goats that I really like is that it seems like no matter what kind of grasses, trees, or anything like that, their hitbox is really small, so I don't really have to worry about anything. I can just keep adding stuff to pretty much my heart's content. It's then that I noticed that the floor is looking very, very flat, so I just add a bunch of flowers everywhere with a bunch of different pinks and purples and reds, just to make some more visual interest as well. I do have to stop building this habitat halfway through because my honey badgers keep trying to kill each other. And then guess what time it is? If you said time to add more rocks, you were absolutely correct, because we are adding more rocks. And I can definitely tell the goats are liking their new habitat way more than their old one. And it is really nice to see them display some more natural behaviors, just by giving them a bit more area and a lot more rocks. I then put a sign on the goats' little clubhouse to make sure that everybody knew that it was only for the goats. No staff and certainly no guests allowed in here. After removing the goats' old habitats, I saw that the guests were pretty upset about not having enough food or drink, so I went ahead and built up a little shopping area for them. When I was happy with how the shopping area looked, I decided it was finally time to move over to the Savannah animals. While I was working on the goat and wolf habitat, I kept getting notifications that they were really stressed out, so I figured it was time for an upgrade. I made sure to use one-way glass, that way they didn't get super stressed out by the people watching them, because honestly the foliage just covered just doesn't really work all the time for me. As I was moving over everybody, I noticed that the springbok was actually the last one, so I made sure to get him a lady friend. I was really aiming for a watering hole kind of theme here, so I just placed a bunch of Savannah rocks down and just try to use bushes and trees sparingly to give it that kind of feel. With all the greenery, I do really like adding some of these orange leaf trees just because I feel like it really adds a pop of color. Unlike the wolves, these guys are very picky, so I have to be way more selective to make this place seem more alive. And of course, I can't get away without placing some more flowers. I just think it really adds, again, more color and some more texture. And after this, I had absolutely no more complaints about their stress levels, and they seemed really, really happy with their new habitat. But I do have to be honest with you guys, the entire time that I was setting up the animals, I've really been neglecting the people side of the zoo, and so everybody was very unhappy. At this point, we were losing a lot of money from refunds just from people not having a good time with the zoo. This made me decide to start the zoo over completely from scratch. So I put all the animals away, destroyed all of the habitats, and moved everything around to try to fix the layout. So say goodbye to the old zoo, and welcome in the new. This entire time I was still going to be rolling for the random animals, and you're going to see me add them in here periodically. So after finishing the entrance of our zoo, I decided to go ahead and put one of our main species in. And this was going to be for the gorilla habitat. I wanted them to have a lot of climbing area, while also making it look a little bit more natural, while as natural as it can be. I even decided to add a small restaurant area so people can observe them from the top balcony. I did have to go back and change a couple things though, because the gorillas could actually go into the dining area, so it didn't work for a little bit. I know you don't usually put these big species at the very beginning of your zoo, but I just wanted something to really draw the eye. After a couple hours of work, they seemed pretty happy in their enclosure. That meant I can get on to the next group of animals. I started working on the prairie dog habitat, and I was trying to space it out where one side was very green and grassy, and the other side was a lot more dead and kind of dry. I really like seeing these little guys scurrying about in the grass and playing around. But honestly, I did have to go back and change a lot of things because after they dig up some holes, they can't access some of the toys and food stations. After that, I decided to make a staff area. But I wanted to change it up a little bit and make it go underground. That way I didn't have to deal so much with people being able to see it. So here and there I would add some of these underground little bunkers for the staff to go into. I did try to pretty them up though, just so that people were a little bit more happy seeing them. After placing the first staff zones, I decided to do our multi-species habitat. So I had to kind of balance everything around their different needs, because although they're very similar, they still have slight differences with like the terrain type and plant foliage. I did turn on contraceptives for these guys, just so that way while I was working I wouldn't keep getting pop-ups from them. And after those guys, we're going to go and get started on my favorite animal of our zoo, and that's, of course, our goats. Now, even though we were restarting, I definitely wasn't going to get rid of the goat house, but I did decide to upgrade it. So I was kind of going for more of like an Arctic cabin kind of feel. And I'll be honest, I did spend about 60 hours redoing this zoo, and these guys probably took up a big chunk of that just because after I started placing some things, I just kind of couldn't stop. And I kept finding little decorations and stuff where I was like, oh, this would look really nice in here. And then after building up the cabin a little bit, I decided to place some more foliage. That way, just to bring some greenery out to the front. And then after the goats, I started up the dingo habitat again. This one was actually one of the bigger builds in the zoo. And honestly, I just spent a bunch of time just going through all of the Twilight stuff. Just trying to make kind of this like spooky castle feeling. And then I made like these catacombs underneath the castle just for the dingoes to sleep. And to get away from all the prying eyes. I did have to redo the fence a couple times because apparently these guys are like Olympians. And they kept breaking out. I tried my best to get some of these rocks to look natural. But it's definitely not my forte. I just keep kind of placing more and more of them until it seems right. And then after adding some more foliage and a couple more rocks, I felt like their habitat was pretty well set up for them. After the dingoes, I decided to do the otters. And these guys were really hard just because I made this giant lake in the middle. And after putting in some rocks, it actually really messed with their pathing, so they couldn't access half of their habitat. So I had to fiddle around with it for quite a while to get it to work out for them. And I tried again to make a waterfall in their habitat, and I did cheat again by using the pre-made waterfall, but I felt like it just added something that it really needed. And what I was going for was placing some winding paths just in between the trees and the foliage, just for people to get nice and close up to the otters. After all of the pathing of the otter habitat, I decided to have a little bit more fun with it, and make an overbridge for our next animal, which was the honey badgers. Now, I love these guys. They don't need a lot of space, but of course, you can only have one male and one female, which isn't too big of a deal because it means I could keep their habitat a little bit smaller. And then I spent the next couple hours making this tunnel system, which honestly didn't look too good, but I was pretty happy with at the end. But hey, the honey badgers weren't complaining. And they did look really cute going over the gas, so I went ahead and added a couple more bridges just to give them some more options. And since I guess the bridge didn't stress me out enough, I decided to do one of the bigger habitats of this zoo, which was the wolf den. When starting the wolf habitat, I really had in my mind that I wanted a giant mountain in the middle, which would be the den for the wolves, but I also wanted a bunch of winding paths where people could get up and close and personal with the wolves, but not, of course, of any danger. And since that wasn't hard enough, I did decide that I wanted the wolves to be able to reach the top of the mountain, so I spent a long time fiddling with the rocks to get them just in the right positions where the wolves could hop up. My amateur building skill did mean that some of the mountain looked quite rough, so I ended up covering that up with a bunch of foliage. And at the end, the wolves could get all the way to the top, so I made sure to put some enrichment where the guests would be able to see them the best, just to give them some incentive to go up there. I did end up adding a wolf path, just because I felt bad for the puppies not being able to go up there, and honestly, it was really cute to see them run up the stairs. And I have been keeping another secret from you. While I was building, we did roll for quite a few primates, so I was saving them for this area, which I started to carve out. The nice thing about the primates is that a lot of them can't go across big bodies of water, but that did mean that I had to fight both the pathing and the water system at the same time. But eventually, I did get everything to work out properly. To set up these habitats, I did add in one of each animal, just so that way I could see their needs and what areas of the habitat that they could climb and get to. For what would be the chimpanzee habitat, I went ahead and made this treehouse for them, and then I also made sure to add some pathway just so that people could see them a lot better, because that was the main complaint in our old zoo, where people just felt like they couldn't observe the animals as well, and that the pathing wasn't as good. And then for what would be the orangutan habitat, I went ahead and started building up this restaurant area because I really wanted people to be able to see into their sleeping area with one-way glass to not stress them out, but at the same time satisfy both their food and thirst needs. So after placing all the structures, I went ahead and placed all of the enrichment and foliage, and I like to do this step last just because I can see what areas of the habitat the animals can actually get to. And I like doing this for the bigger animals because their larger hitboxes means that they actually can't interact with a lot of this area. So I had to be really careful with that. And for our next new animal, I wanted to try something I've seen other people do with elephant grass, where you kind of put it underneath the ground, and for some reason, animals can't walk over it. I did have to go in and change a couple things because for some reason, the peafowl really liked going into the prairie dog enclosure, And that really stressed out the prairie dogs. They did not like that at all. And since primates were the last animal group that we set up, I did want to make a memorial right next to the habitats for Jane Goodall, who passed away while I was recording this video. And that concludes our random animal challenge, so I do hope you guys had fun. I know I did, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.